The last time I did an introduction here, I kind of skipped over half the academic achievements of the person I was introducing. So today I'm gonna read some stuff, and then I'm gonna put in some personal anecdotes after that, because I have the honor today of presenting a fellow Dane, which is the first time that I've done that. So that's a big deal for me. So this is Niels Bru. He's a professor in Internet Studies and Digital Humanities at Aarhus University in Denmark. He's the head of the Center for Internet Studies and of NetLab. His research interests are web historiography and web archiving, digital humanities. His recent books include web history and histories of public service broadcasters on the web. I gotta read that. And he is now editing a special issue of New Media and Society about the first 25 years of the web. As well as the forthcoming books, The Web as History, Using Web Archives to Understand the Past and the Present, which is co-edited with R. Schroeder. Web 25, Histories from the First 25 Years of the World Wide Web, and the Sage Handbook of Web History. So the personal side of that is that I was looking through Niels's CV, and it's always interesting because I went to the University of Copenhagen, so I never met Niels before. But looking through the CV, I find all these touch points where we could have met. One of them is the first time I ever heard about web archiving in general, which was a project that I was doing together with this wonderful woman who was working as the head researcher at the National Library in Denmark. And I remember this was like 2001 or something. And I remember her saying, "Yeah, I'm actually, other than this project, I'm working on a project where we're trying to archive the web." And I was like, "You're what?" "Yeah, we're thinking about how we can archive the entire web." And I was completely mind blown. And of course, when I came to UCLA, many years later, and understood what that entailed, I was like, "Oh, this is what she was talking about." And other than that, Niels has written papers with some of my old professors. Colloquium is one of them, and has written a lot of really important books. This is, as he says, his second academic career. His first is something that you guys will probably appreciate a lot. Niels was sort of one of the major forces in Denmark when it came to the French post-structuralist and postmodernist movement. So he wrote the first book on the Lyotard ever, as in not only in French but ever, and actually the first book on Paul Virilio too. So he did a lot of really interesting stuff. And when you look at the CV, that's kind of half of it. It's just like this massive endeavor into French post-structuralism, which of course, especially Foucault, means a lot to this department. So without further ado, Niels Bru.
Thank you very much. But anyway, maybe I'm going to sit a little bit down because I was out running on the cafeteria yesterday, and it's really very hot. So I have kind of a knee injury. But anyway, I'll try to stand up as much as I can. But thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time at UCLA. Actually, before coming here, I was in San Francisco, gave a lecture at Stanford, and wanted to get to the archive, and then coming down here today for the master tomorrow. And in a way, it struck me. It's almost, at least it's half of the nodes of the first archive network. At least me, Santa Barbara, and Utah. Anyway, I'm going to talk about digital humanities, web history, and web archives as discovered sources. So that's what I've been working with for almost 15 years. And I'm going to take you through some of the main points. If you're going to archive yourself, you're going to use archive web as a source. So you get, it's a crash course in web historiography. So I took these screenshots from, this is your website here, 1997. You don't want to see this, but it is. Taken from the Internet Archive. This is how we looked in 2003, and this is from 2010. Just wanted to show this splash screen to illustrate at least 3 points. The first one is that the web is important. You can't have a university company in order to processing today without having a web presence. So the web is important. Another thing that it shows us is that it disappears. The website from 1997 is not there anymore. Same as 2003, etc. They disappear, and they disappear, as mentioned here, in such a pace that you can only expect to find 10 to 20% of what was online a year ago. And the last thing is that if you want to document the present and use it to study later, you simply have to archive it right then. You cannot wait a year or a month, a week. It will probably be gone. So you have to do some archiving. This is all the points I'm going to take you through. It looks like a huge agenda, but some of them are rather small points. I'm going to start with something about digitized, born digital, and reborn digital, as I call it. A few things about digital humanities, a systematic approach, then how can we focus studies on the web. Small one slide about web history and digital history, the difference between the two. Then a huge part about the characteristics of the archived web. Some analytical consequences of the characteristics of the archived web. Then before that, I'm going to compare digitized collections and web archives. And then what is it to use the web as a historical source? I'm going to illustrate that with two examples. The history of the Danish website. This is gger and DK. It is the Danish National Public Service Broadcasting website. History of that. And then the other example is about an analysis of the entire Danish web from 2005 to 2015. And then I'm going to end by showing you a little bit, telling you a little bit of the institutions that I come from. So now you know where you should take a nap if you need to. And it's going to be rather fast anyway. So I'm going to start with this point about the digitized and the born digital and the reborn digital. The point is, what I want to make is that just because things are digital, they are not necessarily digital in the same way. And the different ways that material is digital has an impact on how we can use it, how we should approach it analytically, how we should archive it, etc. And I distinguish between these three major types of digital material. The first one is the digitized, and that's material that was previously analog, which has then been digitized. Radio, television, what have you. It's one way of using it. So the other one is what we call born digital. It's material that has never existed in any other form than digital. As illustrated here, a website could be anything else in digital form that has not existed in analog or in archive. They have to be treated differently than digitized material. And then the last one is what I call reborn digital material. That is born digital material that has been archived, and in the process of archiving, it is being changed. So in a way, you could say that it is reborn. I'm going to, and this is illustrated with an archive website, so I'm going to talk about the reborn digital material in the rest of the talk. I'm going to compare it with the digitized material. Okay, the next point is what I call a systematic approach for digital humanities. You can ask yourself, well, where is the digital actually when you're talking about digital humanities? That's what I'm going to take. It's based on an article which is going to come in Digital Humanities Quarterly in probably a month. I have the proofs already, but it's going to be published soon. So, the digital, where is it in the research process? Let's have a look at that. So I distinguish between four main phases when you do research. First, you have to have something to study. You have to have material to study. Then you can make your analysis. You may want to go back. Then you can have a debate based on your analysis, and then in the end you can disseminate your final results. This is in a way phases of research, in at least major phases. Most research projects go through it with some way. Then of course you can loop back. You may have made your analysis. You may want to change your material. You may want to study something else. But see, okay, it wasn't the right thing. The debate may be back on the analysis. So if we go back and see how was this played out in the non-digital world, well, we had something to study, material, and it was non-digital. It could be objects, it could be artifacts, it could be written papers, it could be anything. And we used, of course, the methods were non-digital, because the material was not digital. The debate was, in the main, it was face-to-face debate. We also in writing, free publications, and then you had this print media, could be radio and television. So this is how it looked in the non-digital world. So what happened when the digital comes in? Oh, sorry, I had to mention these arrows should indicate that the way that this material is has an impact on how you can analyze it, which tools could you use. Well, if it's an artifact, you can approach it in one way. If it's something writing, it's a radio, television, you should approach it in other ways because of its materiality. Okay. In the digital world, you can use digital tools either for digitizing or for getting, collecting, or archiving digital material itself. So we could look a little bit like this. You may have some non-digital material that has been digitized. That's one way. That's one way you can have the digital. You could also have, as I mentioned before, more digital material, and this could be transformed into more digital material. So when you are in the digital world, you can have these three major types of material to study. And again, since material is digital, you can then use digital tools for analysis, any kinds of tools. And the debate, of course, is enabled in a digital way. You use large species, etc. And the dissemination can be in a number of other ways, not because you want it, but because the material is digital. So again, we have these arrows which impact the way that you can have an interplay with the material. And they are different. They have to have a different approach to digitize one digital and to report it. We're going to elaborate a little bit on that. So if I was asked, okay, digital humanities, this is the humanities research phases, where is the digital? Well, I would say it's basically it is in the material. The material becomes digital. Then you can use digital tools and digital means for dissemination and for debate. But again, you can, if we in a way want to see it as a whole, you could say that even if we have the digital humanities, the non-digital does not disappear. So it's an interplay between we use some stuff in a non-digital form, others in a digital form, some digital tools, but not exclusively digital tools all the way around. So the mapping of the entire digital humanities would also include, in my view, the non-digital in many ways. So this is a systematic approach if you want to pinpoint where is the digital in the research processes. Okay, so now I'm going to drill down and focus on the web. How can you analyze the web? If you look at the web, in a way it is nothing but a huge bucket of files. And that's it. So how can you find some systematic analytical object in that? That's what I'm going to take you through. And I distinguish between what I call analytical strata, file analytical strata, the web element, the web page, the website, the web sphere, and the web assembly. So if you come as a scholar, you want to study the web, I would say, okay, this is 5 major analytical objects you can identify on the web. The first one is quite simple, actually. The web element, it could be any element on a web page. It could be writing, it could be images, it could be sound, it could be some sound. So you may want to study the images on web pages, and that's it. Which is fine if you've done that. Or you may want to study, focus on the text. Then you can use a variety, of course, of all the theories you have, Foucault or discourse analysis or whatever. But this is more focusing on what do we actually study, and not which theories do we use to understand it. So you study the elements on the web page. You can also start the web page as such. People have done that. Studying web pages, studying layouts, studying whatever happens in the web page. So web pages could also be an object to study. Then you can study web pages that are interrelated. And I call that a website. A website, in my view, is interrelated web pages. And they can be interrelated in 3 ways. They can be interrelated in terms of form. They share some formal points in a way. You can look at logos, menus, system, colors, etc. So that's on a formal level. They are coherent. It could also be on semantic level. They treat the same thing. If it's a website about dog breeding, okay, it's about that. It's not about football. So on a semantic level, they should also be interrelated. And then the third level is what I call the physical performance, meaning there should be some kinds of links. So web pages that are interrelated in terms of form, semantics, and physical performance, I would call that a website. So, and you can study websites. It's what most people do anyway. The next level is what I call the web sphere. And the web sphere is interrelated web pages about something. It's hardly an issue, an event, a concept. If you want to study the website or the web activities in relation to political elections or whatever, you can call that a website. So it's more than a website. It's bigger than a website. You can study that and think about that. And of course, you can also study the entire web, the web as such. I illustrate that in the cloud, but I find another way of illustrating it. It could be anything that transcends all the other levels of those classes. It could be browsers, for instance, then not one of the others. It could be the hardware that connects the computers. So it could be different standards and so on. So this is something that transcends all the other levels. So in my view, this would be, if you would like to study the web, this would be file web strata you could study. Then of course you could study the interrelations between them. For instance, if you study images and web pages, what is the relation between the images and the pages that there are, or the websites that are there? So next step is about web history and digital history. I don't know if any of you know anything about digital history and you used to hear it. Digital history is a tradition that started around the beginning of the 90s. And in digital history, the web is conceived as a tool that can be used to disseminate sources or results or to get in contact with. It's a means of communication, not something that should be studied within the digital history tradition. What I term as web history is something that uses the web in itself as a source, as a historical source. So in digital history, the web is a means of communication. In web history, is something we study. And web history is, it has two meanings in a way. You can mean history with the web. That is, web history is something where you use the web as a source. And it can also, of course, be history of the web, that is, telling the history of the web. So web history can have both of these meanings, and of course they can be interrelated. Meaning that if you want to study the history of the web, you'll probably also study history or make history with the web. Okay, so let's have a look at the archive web. Here there's a beginning with the web disappears, so we have to preserve it. So what's the big thing about the archive web? Isn't it just the same as digital newspaper? The short answer is that it becomes a little longer answer. Web archiving, as such, web archiving is done with a purpose, so you have to know why you want to archive. And you can't just archive like that and just get a copy. Because you have there are a number of differences in terms of all the choices you have to. I use the distinction between macro web archiving and micro web archiving. Macro is the one I'm going to talk about now, but just to give you the difference. Macro web archiving is performed by institutions that are professionals. Like national libraries, libraries anywhere. They know what they do and they preserve cultural heritage. They don't preserve it with any specific purpose, but just to preserve the cultural heritage. On the other hand, we have the micro web archive. It could be individual scholars who want to study the web and they want to preserve it for their individual study. They're not professionals in terms of web archive. They're probably very large these days. And they preserve it with a purpose. They need to use it in a specific project, meaning that their collection is not necessarily usable for anyone else. So, but I'm going to talk about macro web archive, but I would say 95% of what I'm going to say also applies to web archive. Okay. As I mentioned in the beginning, the web archive is a real-time archive, so you have to preserve it while it is there. It's gone shortly after this following, so you have to archive it here and now. The next important thing to have in mind when talking about the web is that it is important, as I mentioned, it is unique, and it is very often efficient, and it is a version, and thus it can. I'm going to elaborate on that phrase because there's a lot of stuff. The first thing is that the archiving institutions, they have to make a number of choices. Should the web archiving software go to other servers? Should they include images? Should they not include images? How deep should it go down in the web structure, etc.? So all these choices have to be made. You cannot just press a button and say, go ahead. You have to make a number of choices. And each of these choices, when you make a choice, you omit something else. So that's what's first thing. And that means the consequence of that is that you will never have a copy on a one-to-one scale when you archive the web. If, for instance, we have two different web archives, they want to archive the same website, they do it differently. So you'll get two different versions. None of them would be like the web was while it was online. Therefore, a web archive is a collection of unique versions. It's not copies, it's versions. And they did, in a way, not exist before they were archived, which is quite weird. The archive creates what is archived in a totally different way, as we know from digitization. So the web archive, what is in the web archive, is created in the archiving by the archiving process, and that's why I use the term reborn. So this means it is what I call an actively created and subjective reconstruct. It is. I'm going to elaborate on that phrase. It's subjective in the sense I mentioned before. You have to take all these choices. Someone has to make all these choices. What should be included, what should not be included, etc. How far away from the website start page to go. It's a reconstruction in the sense that it is recreated. What you have in the archive is recreated. What you see is recreated on what you get in the archive, which may not exactly be what it was online. So it has this characteristic of being a reconstruction of something that was online. So the archive web document is a result of an active process. It's not just sitting, waiting, getting something. You actually have to do something to get it in specific form. And in this sense, you could say that what is the really web archive did not exist prior to the act of archiving. It is actually something that we create in a very fundamental sense. Then, of course, it is, as I mentioned before, it is efficient. And there are two reasons for that. First, there are some technical reasons. I don't know if you have any experience you have with the web archiving, but I don't know if any of you have any experience with some of you. So you know that technical reasons means that it's basically fucking up. You don't know what happens. You send your crawlers out there, get something back, suddenly something goes wrong. Don't get it all. Why didn't I get the illusion? I don't know. Why didn't I get this and that? You don't have it. Things happen. Then of course there are the things that no can happen. JavaScript probably almost impossible to archive. Stream material is almost impossible to archive. Can't do it, but anyway. And something like so-called crawler bots, or crawler traps, sorry, meaning that if the web crawler comes, it encounters a calendar. Calendars, they have this strange thing, they tend to be unendless. So the web archive just continues day after day after day after day until it meets its limit. and it then stops and doesn't archive the rest of that website. So, and there's a number of other technical problems that makes it difficult. So if you have been to the Internet Archive and seen that, you probably know what I'm talking about. Then there's another thing I call the dynamics of objects. And that's really weird. It's the thing that when you start your archive, it takes time. So what you archive may have been changed during the time you took to archive. And I found out that the hard way. There's a quote from a book I wrote in 2005, and I'm just going to read it aloud. During the Olympics in Sydney 2000, I wanted to save the website of the Danish newspaper when it's possible. I began at the first level of the front page, on which I could read that the Danish badminton and the party were playing the finals of knowledge. My computer took about an hour to save this first level, after which time I wanted to download the second level for Olympics 2000. But on the front page of this section, I could already read the results of the badminton. The website was, as a whole, not the same as when I had started. It had changed in the time it took to archive, and I could now read the result on the front page where the match was previously announced. This is weird. We haven't had any media in the history of media that has worked like this. It would be as if you took a tape, put it in the video recorder, press record, and then you started to record what was on the television. And when you were halfway through, the beginning had changed. And you could never track it. And the thing is, it is something, of course, you have lost something because you don't get it all. But in a way, you also get something that has never existed on the web. Because when I combine my two versions of that newspaper, it has never existed in that form on the web. So you have these very often inbuilt temporal inconsistencies in the archive web, which is a strange thing. Of course, on the individual web page, it's not a big problem. It can be, but it's not necessarily a big problem. But the minute you scale up to the website, it sure is a problem. So you don't know what happens in terms of this. So what you will get in the process of archiving, it is a unique version. It's not a copy. It's a version, and it's unique. In a way, it's very close to medieval manuscripts, written on parchment. I wrote an article about that some years ago where we tried to compare manuscripts to archive web. So it's a version, and it's a version without an original. You may have a number of versions, but you don't know if any of them, or to what degree, to what extent, any of them could be said to be an original. So you only have versions, which is weird. So if you want to get an idea of what did this website actually look like in the past, the only thing you can do is to compare versions. That's doable. You can do that. In the article I mentioned, I wrote trying to figure out some guidelines for how you do that. So if you want to be sure what the web looked like in the past, you have to compare versions. Okay, so something is missing. It's the next point. It's incomplete. Yes, I also actually talked about that. But this one is what is important. Something is missing, but you don't know if it is missing. You don't know where it is missing, and you don't know exactly what is missing. You may see some images that are not there, but there may be anything, some other things that were still out. And you don't know if it's the case or not. For a historian, that's a challenge. And again, we don't have a stable original to compare with. It's not like digitization where you can go back and check the newspaper. Okay, this went wrong in the scanning process, but I can also go back and do it again. You can't do that on the web. It's gone. And the incompleteness is rarely documented. Most web archives don't come with much documentation. Some do. Some are very good at it. But the minute you scale up to a national web archive, you usually don't come with any documentation at all. Go to the Internet Archive, there's no documentation. You don't know how this page ended up in the archive and why. Okay, so I'm going to go through rapidly a comparison of digital collection. I've touched on it a couple of times, and I'm going to do it in more systematic pragmatic way now. Digital collection compared to archive, well, just to get the difference clear. In a digital collection, you have an analog or algorithm you can go back to. You have to select, of course, what you want to digitize, say newspapers, and you have a digitization process that is by and large transparent. You may have to make a few settings, like clear, you take a newspaper, put it in the scanner, close it, press scan, scan, and there it goes, you get a file. And all the copies will be identical. If I do a copy, a scan, and one library, another one does one other library, they get 10 copies. You can already guess that it's not the case with the web archives and ERPs. It's not an analog original we can go back to, it's an ephemeral original, it's gone. We don't have to select, or we have to select what we want to have in our web archive, but we also have to select how we want to get in as a digital copy. The archiving process is not transparent at all. It is, we have these technical efficiencies, dynamics of objects, we don't know what happens. And again, we have versions without versions. So it's two extremely different collections, two very different types of digital documents on the digital world. If we continue the comparison, in the digital collection, you have only one copy of each. And if I take a newspaper and scanning it, there's no good reason for scanning it in twice, 3 times. I have only one copy. You have a systematic approach, you have a register problem, you know which newspapers from which dates, etc., etc. And you don't have hyperlinks. You can add it if you want to enable the jumping from one paper from one side of the page to another page. You can add a hyperlink, but you don't have to. It's an add-on. In the web archive collection, you have this strange thing of having, in a way, too little, too much. You have too little because you miss things. I mentioned you may miss some images, some links, some words, etc. So you have a lot and you miss. You have too little. You would have liked to have all the images. But in a way, you also have too much. And you have too much in the sense that some of the web pages may have been archived 2 times, 3 times, 5 times within a day. So which one should you use? And how can you compare them? And which one is the best one to use? And the problem arises because web crawling is based on following hyperlinks. So if you imagine you start with the top level of a website, the first page, and you tell the crawler follow links 3 iterations away from that. It goes down and down and instructs. Some of the links may lead to some of the pages that were already archived. So they may be archived 2 times, 3 times, or several times. So what do you do with that? So in that sense, we have too much. We have simply too many versions of the same, which is not exactly the same, maybe the same, but we don't know it. It's unsystematic, we don't have a register. Some smaller web archives do have, that's good, but again, if you scale up to a national level, they don't come with registers. You simply don't know what is in the archive, and the archives themselves do not provide it. The hyperlink is inherent for the web. If you remove the hyperlink, you don't have the web. So the hyperlink is not an add-on in the web archive, it's inherent in what was archived initially, and it also becomes an integrated part of the web archive. And that causes a number of problems, because it gives what I call temporal and spatial inconsistency. I'm going to return to that in a moment. Some of the analytical consequences when we want to make analysis with this strange type of document. I'm going to take you through a couple of those. The first one, the one I just touched upon a minute ago, hyperlinks become inconsistent. The hyperlinks are integrated in the web archive, and this gives rise to this inconsistency related to time and space. I'm going to explain why. The temporal inconsistency between the link source and the link time. How does that work? The thing is, once you start archiving, say, 1,000 websites, you have some links pointing, okay? But that to which they are pointing may be archived a month later, a week later, 2 months later. maybe you have made your settings so that the web crawler should stop at a certain point so it doesn't reach all the big targets, but they may be archived later. So what you will experience is very often that when you go to a web page, you press a link. If you have been to the Internet Archive, you have experienced that, maybe you haven't noticed, but it happens. You will be sent either forward in time or backward in time. Jump around in time. Every time you click a link in the Internet Archive, you jump in time, basically. So imagine you want to make a hyperlink analysis. You at least have to have that in mind. Because the hyperlink network will be inconsistent in terms of time, because he may stretch over too much. So the link source and the link target will not archive at the same time, and that's why it's not inconsistent. This is a huge challenge if you want to make network analysis based on hyperlinks. Regarding the spatial inconsistency, again, we have a problem in the sense that the link target may not have been archived at all, or maybe only parts of it. Again, if you have two websites, you have a link from one to another. The one that is linked to is archived only the front page, but you may have another link pointing to another website, and that website may have been archived 10 levels down, another one 3 levels down. So if you want to count, if you want to have, say, 1,000 websites, if you want to count the hyperlinks, it's a huge problem that they are not all archived in the same spatial depth. So there you will have spatial consistency. Again, it's a challenge for the analytical use of it. And again, it's difficult to determine if and to what extent it is inconsistent. Again, we don't have documentation, we don't know what happened in the archive, etc. So, next thing is that the archive web is edited and editable. And as a writer, the archive content itself, sort of the division of the material elements, can be changed. Again, this is very different from newspapers, radio, television. Newspapers come with a material wrapping, if you could say. You have the paper, and it comes with dates. Radio and television comes with date, time, and this division of it, in, for instance, pages, if it's a newspaper or programs, if it's radio and television, this division is made by the producer, not by the institution that's archived or the researcher. This is very different. Yeah, let's just skip that. Because this is, in a way, the point that the web is a continuum with no clear-cut temporal or spatial subdivisions. We have pages, but we don't know when does a website start? When does it end? It's up for debate. It's a continuum, I would say, because it's simply continuous. It stretches out. And that's why the subdivisions, in terms of time and space, are not inscribed by the producer as we know it from newspapers, where the producer of the newspaper has decided, okay, we want 10 pages today, we want 12 tomorrow. Here we have not the same clear-cut way of delimiting the material. So the subdivisions, they are, in a much higher degree, they are editable. You can edit them. They are scalable, you can scale up and down. How much do we actually consider part of this thing we are studying? And they are random, which is strange. And they are made a posteriori by either the web archive or the scholar. Because if you go to the Internet Archive, you search for a website, you see there's a date. Okay, fine. But what does that date? It's not the date that it was published in the same way as a newspaper is published. It's just the date that it was archived. Then it is the archive that makes the temporal subdivision of this continuum that is the website. So again, it's a big difference. And then next point, subsequent processing is lacking. The amount of data, again, smaller web archives, there you can do some metadata and stuff like that. But in a national web archive, or a huge web archive, adding something or some subsequent processing of the material is simply not an option. It's too big. So you just have to hope that you have got it all and you can do it. Yes. Okay, then I'm going to, and I have now 3 points, main points left. The archive web used as a historical source. If you were a historian and you were coming to the web, you would look at it and say, okay, I would like to use this as a historical source. I might study it. I guess most historians would say, I would like to study the web pages or the websites, because it looks like those. It looks like something that has been written. You know it from the written press. So most historians will probably focus on web pages or websites. But it could be interesting also to have more big data-like things. Remember the web sphere I mentioned earlier? And not a huge number of websites. Use them as a historical source. So that's, in a way, the difference between, you could say, small data and big data. And if you know Michael Moretti, literary professor, is distinct between close reading and distant reading. If you only study little material, small data, web page, websites, you can focus on close reading mode. If you scale up, zoom out, study 1 million websites, close reading is not an option. So you have kind of more distant reading, layer of patterns, structures, etc. So I'm going to take you through 2 examples how I have used, I'm going to use archive web. The first one is this end, and the other one is in the team. So the first one is about the history of one website. It's the history of .org.uk. It's the Danish Public Service Broadcasting, or their website. And I'm going to study the development of that from 1995 to 2005. And this is screenshots from the Internet Archive from their website. I started way back in 2007, still working on it. One of the reasons I haven't finished it is that I got involved in all these research infrastructure things about how we can study large amounts of archive web. And I got involved in what is this web as a historical source, and then I have to write all these mythological and theoretical text about it. And now I'm about to start doing the research in a way. So what I'm going to do in that project is it's going to be a combination of an institutional analysis of the broadcast and more, and in a way that analysis does not need the web in a way. And then I'm going to study the technology, the web as a media, as a platform, and I'm going to study the content. What was on the website? Could have some different ways of focusing that. I'm going to study what we could see, but also focus on the code. I haven't touched upon that, but it's one of the main things and new things with the digital in general, and in particular with web. You can say that text is always 2 layers, at least 2 layers. You have the layer that you see, which you can understand in kind of semantic terms, images, written text, sound, movies, and then beneath that you have the code. And what you actually archive is the code and the files. You don't archive this, you archive the HTML and the files, and then you knit it together again to present it, for instance, in the old Wayback Machine as I do with Niels Bru. Okay, anyway, I'm going to focus on the code to this project. Could be something like the structure of the website, how has that changed over time, over a 10-year period. Could be making a website internal hyperlink network analysis. Could be interesting to see if this, for instance, here you have the menus. This is where the publisher or the broadcaster wants to point you to. But are they also the most central web pages on the website if you look at hyperlinks? Could be interesting to combine maybe more content analysis things with hyperlink analysis on my website. Okay, and then just wanted to flag someone else who has done something similar in a way. an Italian scholar, Federico Nandi, has studied the history of Bologna University's website in Right. So there are other people out there studying individual websites' history. The interesting thing about this project is that Italy do not have a national web archive. 2 countries in Europe that do not have a national web archive. That's Italy and that's Belgium. Or whatever it is. Sorry. The challenge for Federico here is to write the history of Bologna University's website without a web archive. So he has been to the Internet Archive, he has been to Denmark, and actually it happens that we have some copies of Bologna University's website in the National Data Web Archive. Okay. And then I'm going to take you through the other type of the project, on the other end, or big data line. And this is a project that I have started a month ago. It's about studying the entire Danish web from 2005 to 2008. The entire Danish national domain. So the questions we have in this project is, of course, what has the Danish web looked like and how has it developed? Then we would like to look at some of the development challenges in making such a study. How can you do such a study? It's not straightforward, I can assure you about that. And then, what do we need in terms of research infrastructure? In terms of computers, and how can we do these studies? So these were the 3 main questions. And why would we like to do that study? First, we would like to, I consider it a national web, an entire national web. Like, I know in the US it's a little bit different because you don't have the top level domain, country code top level domain, but at least you have one, not US, but probably don't know you have one, but you have. But in all other countries, we have national country code top level domains, .dk, .rs. Anyway, it's interesting to know what does this look like. I consider it a backlog of what is happening on the web. I mean, if you want to study, for instance, the other project about their website, I would like to know, is this a big website? Is it a small website? And is it central on the Danish web? I don't know if I don't know what the entire Danish web is. So that's one reason. Then, of course, we would like to identify some of the patterns that actually are there. I'm going to give you an idea of what it could be later. And then, of course, you could compare an analysis of a national web with stuff outside of the web. For instance, if you have hyperlinks pointing out of the Danish domain to specific countries, how would that be? Is that countries we travel to? Is it countries we trade with? Is it countries where we have migration to or immigration from, etc. So you can actually use an analysis of the web as an element in a larger analysis. So what we want to study is material in the Danish Web Archive from 2005, 8, 10, and 15. How has it developed the Danish web in that period? So what we're going to study is, of course, we know that the web is gone, and we have, and I'm not part of that, I'm a researcher myself, but we work closely together with the Danish Web Archive, which is called Netarkivet, meaning simply Net Archive. And the Danish Web Archive is based on the Legal Deposit Law established in 2005, and they archive the entire country code top level domain.dk, plus material outside of .dk, .com, .nu, which is aimed at a Danish audience, or if the site owner is a Danish citizen. So they have material outside of the country code also. And the Danish domain, the Danish country code is 1.2 million domains. And in the Web Archive today, they have 700 terabytes. So it's quite a big, it's among, I guess, at least 5 web archives in the world, actually. And it's growing extremely fast. I guess it's 150 terabytes per year. They have some different strategies. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, you cannot archive it all. So you have, when you can archive it all, you have to have some strategies so you know what you want to have and what you specifically do not want to entire Danish domain, country code domain. But they don't do it for a very long time. So making one of those, initially they called them snapshots. Snapshots is a very bad word in that connection, because it took between 2 and 4 months. 2 and 4 months is a long snapshot. But anyway, that's how long time it takes to archive the entire Danish web. Of course, if you want to study news websites, that's not good enough. So they have another strategy called the selective strategy, where approximately 100 websites have been selected, and they are archived daily. Some of the pages, and some of them several times per day, some every second day. And it's typically news websites and similar. And then they have the third strategy called the event strategy. And it means that they select between 2 and 5 national events each year, including elections, catastrophes, terrorist attacks, sport events, and archive them more than they do in selective, but not as much as the old one, but during a longer time span. Follow them. So these are the 3 strategies they have in the Danish web archive. And we are going to use, for this project of the Danish web, we're going to use each one of these broad crawls from each year. So it's 1.2 million domain names we're going to study. So we are looking for these 5 things: size, space, structure, alignment, and content. I'm going to take you through each of them to give you an impression of what we're looking for. The first one about size. Of course, it's interesting to know how big is the Danish web. Simply just like that. It's in the beginning, we already know that it was 12 terabytes, which is not big in a way for a national domain. 12 terabytes, that's the size of the Danish domain in 2005. Now it is approximately 30 to 35 terabytes. So it has grown. Then we would like to look at different file types and file types in general. Have image files become bigger, smaller? The average size of a file has grown. Maybe my impression is that because we have got faster connections, so it allows for bigger files, but we don't know. And of course, the size of websites would also be interesting. How big are websites actually on the Danish web? They made some initial analysis in 2007, and they showed that 90% of the websites on the Danish web were smaller than 10 megabytes. Just have to remind you, megabytes. No one talks about megabytes anymore, but they were very small. And then about between 5 and 10% were bigger than 500 megabytes. So the Danish web in 2007 looked like kind of a long tail thing, with very few, very small, and then very many small and very few big websites. Then we want to look at space. Where do websites live? So we would like to strip them for name entities in terms of city names, postal codes, and similar, and simply just to that. Do they live in the big cities or the country or between? You can do that if looking at the servers, because the servers can be located anywhere. So we have access to the content here, so we can actually go strip the content for the name entities and make a geographic graph out of that. We'd also like to look at structure. For instance, we would like to see how, if you start by analyzing the hyperlinks that are, how many, if you imagine a website, how many of the hyperlinks point inwards towards the website itself, and how many points up? That would give you an idea of how close that website is on itself. So if you do that for an entire Danish web, for an entire national web, you can see, okay, I don't know, some 70% of the websites are very close and some 30% are very awkward. I don't know what the result would be, but that would at least be what we have in mind with this project, or with this question. So how close open is how flat, how deep our websites are? Do we have a lot of websites that are extremely deep below the front page, or are they just, what is the average depth of the website? Then we would like to study domain, internal and external hyperlinks. The most used form of doing hyperlink analysis is link analysis based on in-degree links. That is, the links point to something. And if the more in-links you get, the more central you are in the network. So if you imagine, we have these 1.2 million domain names, we stream all the links, and we should just calculate how many in-links does the websites have. And that would give you, for instance, a graph of the 1,000 most central websites on the internet. That would be extremely interesting to know, and especially how that has developed over 10 years. We would also like to look at the Danish web to the rest of the web, outside of the Danish one, as I mentioned before. What do we link to? And as part of that, we will integrate a small analysis of social media. When do we start from the Danish web to link to Facebook, to YouTube, to Twitter? When does that come? How does it evolve? We can calculate that. Align this, the domain names. I don't know if you have any idea of how often domain names shift. We didn't have an idea of that, but we'd like to know. So the Danish web archive, they start with a list. They get a list from the Danish register of the country codes of the domain. A complete list of all the domains that are active at the point when they get the list. And then we have actually done that study already. It was presented actually today in Iceland, a conference of that. And in that study we compared the domain names, which was quite simple actually, just a long list. Compare them year for year. And we could see that it was a huge amount of web domains that disappeared each year, and a huge amount that were registered and new. It was approximately 200,000, which is a fifth of Danish domain that came and went within a year. It was a astonishing high number, at least for me. So it's extremely alive. In terms of domain names. And then we'd also like to look at updating. When the web crawler comes to a website, it can compare if it has changed since it visited last time. So we would like to see how much of the Danish web has actually been updated during a year. Maybe 80% is dead. We don't know, but we'd like to know, and we can find out this. We couldn't make these analyses without the archive. And then the final one is content. We would like to focus on the password-protected website. How many websites use passwords? How protected is the Danish web actually? Specific file types, it actually also they made some small analysis which showed that the ratio between image files and text files in 2007 and 2012 was almost identical. It was 95% text file, 25% image files. And it was the same in 2012, which was a little bit astonishing, I would say. You would expect more images, which is right. There are more images now on the web, but there is also more text. So the ratio was in a way the same. We would like to know something about language. How Danish is the Danish web? Is it English? German, whatever. We'll look at very simple things, the background colors. What is the color of three most used colors, background colors of the Danish web? And has that changed over time? Do we have a blue period or a red? We don't know. Very simple things, fonts, length of web pages. You have all probably the feeling that all the pages that tend to be longer and longer and longer. But is that right? And which parts of a national web is it that we have the longest web pages and the shortest ones? You really can calculate all that. Menu items, you probably also have the feeling that at a certain point menu items were placed on the left side, the browser windows, suddenly they went up and were horizontal. So they are both now. But is that right? It's just a feeling we have. When did it happen? And how does that evolve? And of course, very interesting things about semantics. We count word frequencies. If you imagine a word cloud of an entire national web, 100 most used words, we would look at specific issues and topics. Where did they take place on the web? Say, for instance, with elections, there's eventual elections going on, or at least partly here in the US now. But where on the web are they taking place? Maybe they are taking place, the discussions, at places that we didn't imagine. So imagine you search for specific issues, you make a topic analysis of a topic, have some words you search for, and then you correlate that with the websites, the domain names. So you can simply say, okay, this political discussion took place in this area. Then you can make a hyperlink analysis of the same websites and see, okay, are they actually also interlinked? Or are they just islands? So you can combine topic analysis, modeling analysis with a hyperlink. Okay, the last point. Just to give you an impression of where I come from, the net lab, I mentioned it a couple of times. It's an internet research infrastructure which is placed within a larger framework, which is called the Humanities Lab that was established in 2012. And it's based on something that existed beforehand, which is the Center for Internet Studies, which I'm heading now. And we have a structure in this larger framework called the Humanities Lab with 3 main clusters of research infrastructures. And the second one is about media. It's divided in radio, television, and internet studies. Some of what we do is about the online net, and other things are about the archive. And I'm working with this one. So we have tried to establish a research infrastructure for the study of archives. What does that mean? It means that we, for instance, work closely together with the Danish Web Archive. So to perform this project I talked about the Danish Web domain, we can't run it on this computer like that. So we need a huge computer. So that's part of the research infrastructure that the Danish Web Archive have got some funding from the European country to go buy. It's a high-performance computer. It's not a high-performance computer as they would have in physics, but it's within the humanities and social science. It is a high-performance computer, and it's in a way sitting on top of the archive. So when we're going to run these analyses, it's going to be run on a Hadoop cluster, which is sitting on top of the archive. So this means that we have very close collaborations between what I do as a researcher and try to develop in terms of tools and workshops, as we're going to have tomorrow in the masterclass, and what is actually in the archive. So we work closely together with them, and we have an IT developer as part of the research infrastructure. And he's sitting half of his time at the archive, and the other half of his time is sitting right next to me. So he knows what I think as a researcher, and he can go and tell the archive what I want as a researcher, and he can come back to me and tell what I can ask for, because the archive cannot do it. It's an extremely well-functioning structure to have the archive, IT developer, and researchers working closely together. And we have what we call NetLab Forum, which is a forum where we gather researchers, IT developers, and a couple of others, and the IT developers from the archive that also come to this NetLab Forum, and then the curators from the archive also come. So it's an extremely fruitful community in a way. So we are around, I would say, 10, 12, 15 people gathering 5 times a year. And then, last thing, something called RESORT stands for a Research Infrastructure for the Study of the Archive Web. And it's, you can imagine, we have in Europe, we have these national web archives. They're limited by the borders of the nation. So if I'm looking in the Danish web archive, and I press a link that goes to the UK, I probably would not find what's at the end So what we're trying to do in this project here is to make an overarching research infrastructure that enables you to search in all the national web archives in Europe. To search and to make analysis and to do everything that we can do in each of the national web archives, to do that across web archives. Collaborative partners from European research infrastructure for study of archives. And it works a little bit like this. We have the national web archives and the Internet Archive is part of the project. And then we have the research and research communities. And the archive, they will work together, collaborate about archive stuff, curator, technical things. And then scholars will collaborate about research projects. We have a number of research projects that we will start if the project gets funded. And then, of course, the most important is these arrows where we will have close collaboration between the web archive and the scholars. It's a consortium that is in its making, and we have made an application for some funding from the EU, also for the Horizon 2020 program. And we had an application a month ago, and hopefully we'll get some funding from that. I guess that was about it.
So, any questions? I'll happily start with one. Actually, two. So, in terms of the temporal aspect of it and the dynamic aspect of this whole thing, I am curious to first of all hear your thoughts on archiving social media, and then there was another thing that struck me. Does anybody look at usage patterns and archive those, like what the traffic that flows to certain parts of the website, so that you can see in a more historical context what were people looking at, what was important for people at the time?
About social media, that's a difficult in other ways, I would say, but from a different fundamental ways, they're not different from a website, except that the rate of the change is much higher. I mean, it's a flow that comes like this. So that's a different. The change rate is higher, but there is also change on a website. And then of course you have the lines between social media and websites can be very difficult to draw, because many social media are embedded as feeds in websites. So it means that many of the websites you can find in the archive or the web archive, if there was a feed from Facebook, it's just blank. So archiving social media is a huge, huge challenge for a number of reasons. For instance, Facebook, they changed their algorithms and their way of being in a way all the time. So I guess they have in the Danish web archive half a man-month working all the time to track the changes of Facebook so that they're able to archive. So it's not trivial, and it's expensive. It's labor-intensive, resource-intensive, but it's doable. And of course you can do. I didn't mention that, but you can archive social media by using the APIs. So you can in a way drag it out of the social media. That gives a number of other issues, because I wrote an article where this actually was a paper to a conference together with a colleague about Facebook. How can you preserve Facebook, and what does that imply for the studies you can make with Facebook afterwards? And we identified a number of ways that Facebook could be preserved. You could do it like web crawling, as I'm talking about here. It gives you some advantages. You will have it in a machine-readable form, but it gives you a number of drawbacks. Because, for instance, scrolling. When you roll down on a Facebook page, it has to kind of unfold, and that doesn't play with a web crawl. It can't do that. So you just have the first page, and that's not good enough. Then you could make a screen movie. For those of you who are going to come to the masterclass tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. take a screen, you simply film your screen, and then you can do the scrolling yourself. And then you get it all. But it's not machine readable in the sense that you can do analysis with it. And it doesn't scale. I mean, you can do that for lots of other places. You can do it if you remember the distinction I had between macro archiving and micro archiving. It's a researcher who wants to study Facebook, and he or she wants to be sure that everything is there. And I would suggest a film, a screen film, if it's not too many web pages. And you can do screenshots. Don't look at that. It's clean and dirty. You can do that. It works. But again, it gives you some disadvantages. So that's some advantages. And then you can do the API. So you can actually drag things out of Facebook, of profile, and you'll be able to do that. But what you'll get there is columns. You kind of take it out via the API and then put it into a database. So you'll get a column for the name, the timestamp, whatever it is, whatever happened. So you don't have the look and feel. You don't have what was there at the same time on the web page. So each of these ways of archiving social media are good in each their way. And it means that you have to know what you're going to use it for. If you want to do this in a specific kind of study where it's important that you have all the images, I would go for filming. But if you want to have all the timestamps and know the network, etc., you would do the API. So it depends, and that's why it's a challenge for the national web archives. Because which one are they going to do? I mean, they have to make a choice. And I've been debating that with the Danish Web Archive at several occasions. I think they should do API archiving. And then it's up to the researchers afterwards to knit all that together. But it's better to have it and to do the knitting afterwards and not have it. Your other question was traffic. Traffic, yes. I don't think archives do much in that. They should. Yeah, I can see your point. I definitely agree. They just go out and get what's there. I don't know if they could probably get to the traffic figures, but if they archive it anyway, I mean, so they don't need, if they archive it all, if you don't archive it all, then it could be a way of finding out where they should do it. It's more a curatorial thing. But if they take it all, but, yes. Fire away. I'm going to, am I going to ask the questions myself? Do that.
I'm curious your thoughts, kind of going back to your definition of micro and macro web archives. So I think we're all probably pretty familiar with institutions that are doing macro level web archiving, like the Internet Archive or Library of Congress. In terms of smaller institutions or even individual archivists that are doing web archiving, I'm curious what your thoughts are, like what role they have in kind of creating a clearer or more complete picture of the web, or if those more curated collections are of increased value to researchers when huge macro level web archiving efforts are less documented, more shallow, for example. I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think they can be extremely valuable because the national level or the transnational Internet Archive, they have one way of doing it, and they get something. They don't get it all, and they know they don't get it all, but they get as much as they can anyway. But if you would like to be sure that you have your objective study, then you should either go to your library and ask them for it if they have it set up, or you should do it yourself, depending on the scale. And then you may supplement things. You may think, okay, I didn't get it all in my own archive, but maybe I have a couple of pages in the archive, maybe something in other archive, something like Library of Congress. So I guess that's what scholars are going to do in the future. They have to get familiar with all the existing web archives. And simply, as historians have done for decades, and centuries, to use all the archives that we have and find the stuff you want to study and combine it. Because, again, if it's versions and not copies, Well, you may find something from your web page or your website in another web archive, because they've done another type of web archive. I mean, it's a good thing to have as many web archives as possible. It's a little bit like if you imagine someone studying I don't know, Greek culture. You may find small fragments of a vase. You may not have it all, but it's nice to have the fragment. It's better than nothing. And if you have 5 fragments, well, then you can actually figure out how to do it.
I want to kind of push you a little bit more on your suggestion that APIs are the way to go for archiving social media. I mean, and I think this applies to web archiving in general, but the web and websites weren't designed to be archived, we're designed to be collected this way, and in fact, especially for large social media sites, they're actively resisting like crawler technologies to archive and collect this content, and APIs are sort of like this sort of strange agreement between an archivist institution and a corporation saying, this is exactly the content that we will allow you to take at this rate, and it could also be expensive depending on, like there's services that contract out to like Library of Congress to get tweets and things like that. So I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are about this tension between archivists kind of almost illegally getting content for getting good purposes and the, I guess, goals of a lot of corporations that are managing websites like Facebook or Twitter, et cetera, that are opposed to heritage institutions owning this history or having a copy of it.
I think it's seen from a cultural heritage perspective and from a researcher's perspective. I guess we would like to have as much to study as possible in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So I would go for dragging out stuff with the API if we could. But again, you have actually 2 tensions. You have a tension between the national web archive and the conference, but then you also have a tension within the archive between the usual way of doing it, between like web crawling and then the API. Because seen from an organizational and technical view from a web archive or for a web archivist, it's not nice to have these API things. How does it fit into your archive? How do you search it? How do you find it? How do you build out a totally new structure? And we have had this discussion within the Danish Web Archive, and they don't go for it like that because they have to build up a new structure in terms of technology and how to make it fit with what they have already. So it's not straightforward. So we have at least 2 tensions, I would say. And the one with the companies is in a way the least one, the least resistant. But I mean, so as long as the companies allow for it, I think they should just go against it. Or against it, because you have to build up a database structure.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions, I'm wondering if we should take it upstairs, and we're just going to be hanging around for a little bit.